Thank you, Vincent, my new associate technician, Vince Bryle. Uh, that's Demi's son, my stepson. He's been now working with us on the programs. And I want to say congratulations to Vince and say hello to all of you out there. Welcome to my world. Won't you come on in? Boy, you're flat, Jay. Welcome to my world. Won't you come on in? Welcome to my heart. This is where we begin. I just made that up. I'm not sure the next line, but the kids still got the voice, I think. What do you think? Hey, a startling fact before we get into the topic on the conscience. Only 3% of people write down their vision as God encourages, and those 3% own 90% of the wealth. So when God says in His Word to write the vision down, 97% of you don't do that. But the 3% that do are related to the people that are the wealthiest people in the world. They own 90% of the wealth. Can you imagine? I mean, when God tells you to do something and you don't do it, that's pretty foolish, right? I mean, especially it's guaranteed to work. I mean, do you realize that God can't change, lie, or fail? And He did what He did so that we could produce His promises to others that they would believe. And isn't that how people believe? They say, well, show me. You say God is the way. Well, show me that God is the way. Let's look at the work of our conscience. When a child does something wrong, he should feel the wrong of what he has done through his conscience. But how does our conscience work? Compliance to commands and rules. Coincidence judges our actions, whether they are in agreement with our moral standards. You'll find that in 1 Samuel 24:5, 2 Samuel 24:10. It executes the judgment within a person's soul as guilt, shame, and estrangement from God. Psalm 32:4. When a child does something wrong, he should feel the wrong of what he has done through his conscience. But how does our conscience work? I'm glad you asked that question. Children would not experience guilt unless we first teach them principles of right and wrong. Now, I don't particularly and totally agree with that, because kids know, if you recognize being parents out there, when they're very young, there's already a rebellious spirit inside of kids. They already say no. You notice that? And then you say yes. Okay? So there's a confrontation going on right away. So I think the kids know that they're doing wrong, and they are only made aware of the fact that it's wrong, or that they can understand that this is a wrong thing, is by your disciplining them. And you say, no, that is not correct, that you cannot do that. It says here, it executes the judgment within a person's soul as guilt, shame, and estrangement from God, as I mentioned, Psalm 32:4. When a child does something wrong, he should feel the wrong of what he has done through his conscience. But how does our conscience work? I repeated that just in case you might have forgotten. And I guess you thought I didn't realize what I was doing. You're right. I didn't realize what I was doing. Children will not experience guilt unless we first teach them principles of right and wrong. That's where we left off, and I said I didn't agree with that. Once the child has internalized these rules, you can trust the God-given conscience to work. So in other words, we have to put that word in them for them to be able to make a proper discernment for good. Proverbs 20, verse 27 is where you need to look. And cause guilt to arise whenever a standard is violated. However, conscience is not an infallible guide to behavior because it works according to the standards we have adopted. Therefore, it is important that the rules internalized are biblical and not legalistic or sub-biblical. Let's see. In 1 Corinthians 8:7, some had a weak conscience due to ignorance and failed to understand that everything is clean, thus feeling guilty when they should not. Nevertheless, that weak conscience should not be violated. 1 Corinthians 8:10 through 13. Because to act contrary to one's own conscience is sin. Romans 14:23. At the other end are those with a sacred conscience that has lost its sensitivity through repeated disregard of its promptings and through persistent embrace of evil. in the context of 1 Timothy 4, 2, and 3. The evil is spiritual pride based on false asceticism. Conscience is not implanted full-blown in the human personality. A rudimentary conscience first emerges during the preschool years. How do we help our young children develop this conscience and internalized biblical standards? Okay, you with me so far? Okay, we're about halfway through. Teach rules and values that are consistent with the Word of God. A child's behavior is guided by concept of right and wrong, prohibitions and expectations as spelt out by his parents. These should be solidly based upon the Word of God. Personally, I am convinced that we must not place Christian disciplines like prayer, reading the Word, etc., in the same category as biblical imperatives. A failure to keep a discipline is not sin. Enforce consequences for compliance and non-compliance. Note that the mere effort to teach right and wrong will not necessarily lead to moral behavior. We must expect obedience. One way is to enforce consequences for compliance and non-compliance to rules using rewards, relief, punishment, and penalty, which I agree with and which is what I do. For example, my son Vince just left here with his new bike that we got him, and he rode away with his thongs on. And I've told him, Vince, you're not to go out without your shoes on or some kind of supportive footwear. And so because of that, he knew, I guess, in some way that he was doing wrong. I guess when he was riding, he might have noticed, you know, I'm without my shoes, proper footwear. So I got a feeling that when I get home, if Papa didn't find out, I'm in trouble. And guess what? He's in trouble. So I grounded him for 2 days. Why? Because it could be very serious if he ever gets caught in a situation without having proper footwear. And he could die in the middle of a street by somebody, and he loses control and goes in front of a car. So you see, that's what they're saying, enforce consequence for compliance and non-compliance. You have to enforce consequences. Teach in a climate of unconditional love. Grace, undeserved and unconditional, should characterize our dealings with our children. Found in 2 Timothy 1:9 and Romans 5:8. Nothing should change our love for and our relationship with our children. They are and will always be our children. Parenting by grace does not mean that there is no law and that our children are free to do as they please. It is because we love our children that we explain what it means to be our children and the behavior we expect from them. You got to give reasons for the rules. Giving reasons for a rule helps your child to judge the worthiness of the rule. This will help children to embrace the rule as his own. Internalization of a rule has taken place when a child feels ashamed of himself when he has violated that rule, even when his parents are not aware of his violation. And again, I agree that if you approach these children with a heart of love and compassion and mercy, never talking down, never trying to control, never trying to undermine or to belittle, always with consideration and concern. I so appreciate Stephen Covey's book regarding proactive approaches in dealing with one another in all relationships. And he goes back to the basic youth conflict that we experience in growing up, that we grow up with these things, and we encounter one another in the same way. So there's an area that is spoken of, that let your conscience be your guide. Sometimes that's true, but I would say let the Word be your guide, because your conscience could get you to go in the wrong direction because of our own self-will. So I would say if it doesn't line up with the Word and your conscience is saying, well, I felt it was okay, but a feeling is not going to save you, the Word will. So you go to the Word and you go to the Lord, you say, Lord, what will you have me do in this instance? And I'm sure the Lord will tell you the right thing to do. It'll be the thing that'll be best for you and for others. So until next time, I want to remind you, contact us at our blog. We're here in the city of Davao in the Philippines. Contact us with your prayer requests, your praise reports. And as I say, we're here every day putting new material together, 10-minute shows just to help you out. We'll see you again soon. God bless you all around the world.